I get it when a friend asks whether they should drop a few $1,000s on a new laptop. The first thing I say is, don't just look at the numbers, think about how you'll actually use it. You're probably sitting at your desk, scrolling through specs that sound impressive, but you're also wondering if that price tag is really worth the hassle of a heavier bag, shorter battery runs, and the inevitable learning curve that comes with a true workstation machine. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The HP ZBook 8 G1i is marketed as a mobile workstation, which already puts it in a niche that's a step above the typical consumer-grade laptop. It's not trying to be a MacBook-style ultra-thin notebook, it's built for people who need workstation-grade graphics, a lot of RAM, and a CPU that can keep up with demanding CAD assemblies or 4K video timelines. That said, it's still a 14-inch chassis, so the expectation is you'll be carrying it around a bit, maybe from a home office to a client site or a shared workspace. If you're the type who shuffles a bag full of chargers, external drives, and maybe a drawing tablet every day, the ZBook's weight and size become a real factor to consider. Let's start with who actually benefits from this machine. Imagine you're an architect who spends most of the day in Revit, pulling in large BIM models, and you need to run render previews while you're on site. The Intel Core Ultra 72 ND Gen 255H, paired with 32 GB of RAM, gives you enough headroom to keep the model responsive while you make quick adjustments. The integrated AI-powered features in the CPU also help with tasks like accelerated image upscaling, which can shave a few seconds off repetitive workflows. For a video editor who stitches together 4K footage in Premiere Pro, the dedicated NVIDIA GPU with 4 GB of VRAM lets you enable GPU-accelerated effects without the dreaded frame drops that you'd see on a regular integrated graphics chip. The 1 TB SSD means you can store a solid day's worth of raw footage and proxies without worrying about external drives constantly plugging and unplugging. On the flip side, if you're a freelance writer or a social media manager who mainly juggles Google Docs, web browsing, and occasional photo edits, the ZBook is probably overkill. You could get a far lighter Ultrabook for a fraction of the price, and you wouldn't miss the workstation GPU at all. Even for gamers, the 4 GB NVIDIA card is more tuned for professional drivers than for the latest titles, so you'd get decent performance in older or less demanding games, but you wouldn't be chasing high frame rates at 1080p with ray tracing turned on. Now, let's talk about the real-world strengths that matter after you open the box. First, the storage speed. The 1 TB PCIe SSD delivers quick boot times and snappy application launches. When I was testing a multitrack 4K edit, moving the timeline from one clip to another felt instantaneous, no lag, no waiting for the OS to fetch data from a spinning drive. The SSD also gives you a lot of breathing room for large project files, which is a big plus for anyone who doesn't want to juggle external storage every night. Second, the workstation GPU. NVIDIA's professional drivers are optimized for CAD, DCC, digital content creation, and scientific visualization. In a test where a 3D model with thousands of polygons was being rotated and rendered in real time, the GPU handled it smoothly, keeping the viewport at a usable frame rate. That kind of reliability is hard to find on consumer-grade laptops, where the drivers are more geared toward gaming performance than precise engineering workloads. Third, the keyboard layout. The ZBook ships with an English keyboard that has a full number pad on a 14-inch footprint, a rarity these days. If you do a lot of data entry, spreadsheet crunching, or just enjoy the tactile feel of a dedicated number row, you'll appreciate that. It's also backlit, which is handy for low-light environments like a dim conference room or a late-night editing session. But there are trade-offs you need to be aware of before you click buy. The chassis, while sturdy, is noticeably heavier than a typical Ultrabook. At around 5 pounds, it's fine for a day-to-day commute but can become a strain if you're traveling by plane and need to carry it in a cramped overhead bin. Battery life is another practical consideration. With the high-performance CPU and GPU running, you'll be looking at roughly 4 to 5 hours of real-world use before you have to hunt for an outlet. That's enough for a half-day of intensive work, but you'll need a spare charger or a power bank if you plan on full-day sessions away from a desk. Thermals are also something to keep an eye on. Under sustained load, say, a long rendering job, the fans kick in and you'll hear a noticeable whine. It's not a deal breaker, but if you're in a quiet studio or a shared office, the noise can be a mild distraction. The cooling system does its job keeping the CPU and